Hey, it's Dan Salzberg. This is Smart Science, episode number 3, Ethics, Science, and the Environment. So when I first started this company, I put up a bunch of products on my website. Keep in mind, I was fresh out of college with big brand water. I was in a 1,000 square foot warehouse in Canoga Park, not the best area. I would come in the morning, there would be bullet holes in my bay doors. There was a lot of gang activity in that area. But keep in mind, I had sold Beanie Babies on the 405 freeway on-ramp to save up enough money to rent this warehouse. So I saw the internet as a way where I could essentially have a 100,000 square foot warehouse virtually by putting things up on the internet. So I had 7,500 products up on the website. A few months later, I get a letter from the California Department of Health Services stating that everything on my website was illegal. I had these 7,500 products up there, and I hadn't paid the state a, quote, certification fee of $1,100 per product. So I got a bill, I kid you not, for $8.25 million. Okay, and I'm in 1,000 square feet. I maybe have less than $5,000 in inventory, less than $5,000 in the bank. I have college debt, student loans to pay off, and so on and so forth. So I called the Department of Health Services and I inquired about the bill, and I said, what's this bill for? And they said, oh, well, if you sell a water product in the state of California, you have to pay us $1,100 for each product. And I explained to them that there was only a handful of systems. I had my own certified reverse osmosis systems that I claimed certification on, and I did get those independently third-party validated. But a lot of these other products were just standard industrial plumbing products that many other distributors sold. They said that doesn't matter. I needed to pay them $1,100 for each product. And I asked them, I said, well, what are you doing for the $1,100? I said, are you going to test the products? Are you going to come into my facility and do random inspections and make sure that the products I'm selling are what's advertised? Are you going to test them for chemicals? Are you going to test the water produced to see if there's any toxic chemicals that are banned in the EPA Safe Drinking Water Act? And they said, no, we're going to allow you to sell them. So I said, well, that's not a certification, that's a tax, and if you want to impose an $1,100 tax for every product that I advertise, even though I haven't sold any of them, you should put it on the ballot and have the voters vote on it. They responded, they were sending me to the California State Attorney General for criminal prosecution. So sure enough, I get a letter a month or two later from the state of California. And this is what it is to run a business in California. It's like, hey, you're trying to earn a living, that's illegal, we're gonna put you in jail, right? So I get this letter from the State Attorney General that I owe $8.25 million to the state of California, even though my total revenue at the time was maybe $100,000 a year, $150,000 a year, if that. So I went into an explanation to the State Attorney General, and I said that if anything, that this is fraud. The state is putting these state of California gold seals on these water systems, and they're being sold in Costco and Home Depot, and they've never seen the system, tested, inspected, or done anything to verify that the performance is accurate. And then at the extreme, I had competitors, some big public companies like, let's say, Watts, which is publicly traded. They have these reverse osmosis systems in Costco and Home Depot, and they're claiming arsenic reduction. Now, reverse osmosis, at best, there's two forms of arsenic, 3+ and 5+ in water. It needs to be chlorinated to convert it to 5+, which a reverse osmosis will remove 80% of the arsenic. But most of the time, people who have well water who are buying reverse osmosis remove the arsenic don't know this. The arsenic's in the 3+ form, and it's only removing 30% of the arsenic. So people are buying these systems at Costco and Home Depot thinking that they're removing arsenic from the water, and they think because it's got this state of California gold seal on there that somehow the state has verified that the system in fact does what's advertised, but it's fraud because the state of California hasn't tested or certified anything. So my argument to the State Attorney General was that if anything, that the Department of Health Services was just one huge fraud. And at some point, the people there agreed with me, and the tax bill was dismissed. And I had a bad relationship, to say the least, with the Department of Health Services for the remainder of my career in water treatment. At the very end, I had a water store in my last warehouse, which was in Ventura County. It was the only water store ever to have perfect lab tests every single time. Heterotrophic plate count, which is mold, fungus, yeast, algae, or any aerobic bacteria, any oxygen-consuming microorganisms, lead, heavy metals, VOC chemicals. I always tested non-detectable, and they said, well, that's impossible. I said, well, what do you mean it's impossible? They said, well, no one's ever tested perfect. I said, well, I have. These are my tests from an EPA certified lab. It's costing me at least $600 each time I test. They kept making me test again and again. They didn't believe it. Finally, I had to have a conversation with somebody at the EPA up in Sacramento and explain how my system did it and how I worked. And, I really didn't want to. That's my proprietary intellectual property. Fortune 500 companies hire me for a reason when they fail their lab tests and they want to put their product in the major box retailers and in the major supermarket chains. They need to hire a consultant like me to design a system so they don't have bacteria or viruses or mold, fungus, yeast, or algae in their product. So this is what I do for a living. That's how my system tested perfect. So all these certifications out there, I take them with a grain of salt. And really what it comes down to, a lot of these certifications, it comes down to money. Who's willing to pay them money? The only one out there that I really feel is a valid certification is UL, Underwriters Labs, where if you buy an electric device, and it's UL certified, UL is the only organization out there that actually goes to these facilities and does random inspections and makes sure that all those components that were advertised as being in the system are there and that what they tested is actually what they're selling. One of the last projects I did before I closed my company, I got to the point, I had 10,000 square feet, I had at least $1 million in inventory, 24-foot high pallet rack, 30,000 customers globally. I'd built a huge business. My employees, none of them wanted to get the education I had. They didn't want to learn the math or the science to make the stuff work. They were stealing like crazy. I needed triple hernia surgery, and at some point I decided to close the warehouse. But what it came down to, one of the last jobs that one of my guys tried to close, there was some American Indian tribes that were just north of the Canadian-U.S. border on the Canadian side, and they had arsenic in their water. Back to this arsenic, there's a reason I brought up that arsenic example. And they had been screwed so many times. And so one of my guys had put together a package deal with some other company to remove the arsenic, and the deal was about $250,000. We had about $75,000 in profit in it. This other company made these systems that were supposedly removing the arsenic, and we were selling them essentially what we use commonly in our whole house systems, or often pre-treatment and industrial applications, sediment and carbon filters. So I was a little skeptical, so I wanted to talk to this company that made these systems that removed the arsenic. And basically it was one of these, there's a lot of this in my industry. So you get these box, it's a square box, it's got a bunch of flashing LED, red and green lights on it, maybe an LCD display, displays some sort of nonsense, and they're claiming it removes the arsenic. So I asked the guy, I said, well, what's the mechanism that it's using to remove the arsenic? And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I'm a scientist. I have a strong chemistry background. I have 8 years of college. I have 4 degrees. If we go to the fundamentals of physics, matter can neither be created nor destroyed. The arsenic has to go somewhere. So are you removing it with ion exchange? In other words, is the arsenic being bonded to a resin, and then we're dissolving hydronium, hydroxide ion, or a cation or whatnot? He said, well, no. And I said, well, is there filter media that needs to be replaced? He said, no. And I said, well, where's the arsenic going? And he starts with this, there's a lot of this, we call it water quackery, this hocus pocus. Oh, well, it's so advanced that even the scientists don't understand. I said, well, I'm a scientist, and there has to be an explanation that has to go somewhere. He starts backpedaling it. Then he says, well, I thought your systems were removing the arsenic. So I went to go cancel the sale. My employee who had put the deal together was really upset. He said, well, Dan, we have $75,000 in profit in this deal, and I want my commission. I put the deal together. I said, well, I'm not paying you a commission to poison the American Indians. The system's not going to work. So There's a lot of this in this industry. There's these water ionizers that are so advanced that they claim they cure cancer, diabetes, heart disease, all these other illnesses. I see these Kangen water systems. There were some ads recently on Facebook that they were claiming that even the president uses this system in the White House, and they don't. I've supplied equipment to what the president uses in the White House, and it's not a multi-level marketed plastic system with LED lights that was made with offshore labor in Asia. Okay, it's a legitimate system designed by a PhD scientist. So I went up to Monsanto. They had me do 3 or 4 days of consulting there and install these commercial reverse osmosis systems that I sold them. And when I get up there, the first thing they had me do was I had to watch, they called it a safety video. And basically, the videos were showing these starving people in Africa and third world countries and how these genetically engineered seeds were going to save hundreds of millions of lives or billions of lives all around the world. Monsanto paid for a lot of the students at UC Davis who were doing PhDs in agriculture or related fields. They paid for their PhD, and in exchange, these people would work in the Monsanto labs and help genetically engineer these seeds. There was a lot of misinformation that went on up there about the seeds, and I was led to believe that these seeds were actually going to be used for a philanthropic purpose, not as a money-making purpose. And ultimately, look, here, the controversy over the genetically engineered seeds is that organic produce has been scientifically proven to be healthier for us. It's not that, and Dr. David Sinclair, in one of either his podcasts or his book Lifespan, he was discussing genetically engineered fruits and vegetables, and he says there's a lot of misinformation and there's nothing at all wrong with them, and there's nothing wrong with eating them. And yes and no. Organically grown produce produces enzymes and different molecular compounds that protect the produce from insects and from disease. And those same compounds in our bodies protect us from disease as well. So these genetically engineered seeds, what they're doing, it's eliminating biodiversity. The natural pollination process, what's happening is these small farmers that aren't using Monsanto seeds, they end up with cross-pollination, and Monsanto gets some of their produce and then ultimately sues them, buries them in attorney's fees, and look, we're gonna bury you in hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars in attorney's fees unless you use our genetically engineered seeds. So then they charge them every year to use the seeds. They aren't allowed to, if they grow, let's say, apples with a Monsanto seed, they aren't allowed to take the seeds from those apples and then grow more apples the next season. They have to buy new seeds every year. So that eliminates any sort of Darwinism or evolution where the fruits or vegetables develop a natural resistance to disease. Also, these genetically engineered fruits and vegetables are really engineered to work with Roundup, which glyphosate has been now proven to cause cancer. There's been quite a few lawsuits. I'm sure you've seen it in the news media. There's been some big ones recently, some big judgments against Monsanto. So greenwashing is the term that we use with stuff like this, where they like to advertise that they're saving the planet and they're somehow benefiting humanity when all they're really doing is engineering the seeds to work with pesticides. And now we're finding glyphosate from Monsanto's Roundup in pretty much everything. It's in our organic wine, it's in our organic fruits and vegetables, it's in our entire food chain. And this is back to, I think I introduced this principle in episode 1. The first rule of ecology is that everything is connected to everything else. And if you start putting enough chemicals in the ground, you might not see it in the water in a year or two, but groundwater is always moving. Nothing in this world is static. It was Heraclitus, the philosopher, said the only thing constant in this world is change. Your groundwater is always moving. It might move 5 feet a year or 10 feet a year or 20 feet a year, but next thing you know, the farmers next door, the farmers down the street, the farmers a few miles away, have all these same chemicals in their groundwater that the one organization was using initially. So we have glyphosate, this carcinogen, now in our entire food chain, and we really need to be aware of this and stop using these sorts of chemicals and go back to farming organically, where our fruits and vegetables have natural resistance to pests and disease. I was very involved in politics early in my career in water treatment with my company, Big Brand Water, and I used to donate a lot of product to Heal the Bay in Santa Monica, and then I also supported an organization called Santa Monica Baykeeper. And one day I was out at a fundraiser for Santa Monica Baykeeper. This was out at Santa Monica Beach, and our mayor at the time, Mayor Viragosa, shows up. He has his limousine. He comes out. The limousine's idling the whole time he's there. And I introduced myself to him. I said, Mayor Viragosa, it's a pleasure to meet you. My name's Dan Salzberg from Big Brand Water in Chatsworth, California. And he responded, oh, I get a lot of racist letters from Chatsworth. I didn't know what to say. I was, what did I do to deserve this? And so trying to be tactful, I said, well, thank you, Mayor Viragosa, for coming out here today and supporting our environmental cause. And, sometimes they say that people see the world through their own filters, and if you think the whole world's racist and the world is full of hatred, then that's what you're going to see. And somehow that's what he saw there. This had nothing to do with racism or anything else. This had to do with the environment. And Santa Monica Baykeeper was actually suing the city over discharge from the LA River that exceeded total maximum daily load limits that we have for chemicals that can be discharged into the ocean. So there was this big lawsuit going on. I ended up buying a lunch with one of our city councilmen at this event. It was Dennis Zine, really an outstanding guy. He had been a LAPD officer for over 30 years before he became a city councilman. The guy would go on the radio at 6 a.m. For some nonprofit cause, and then go down to City Hall and work at City Hall for the remainder of the day. And so he wanted to meet with me and hear what this lawsuit was all about. And I was just baffled. I get down there and I'm behind the scenes there at City Hall, meeting with all the city councilmen, Eric Garcetti, who's now the mayor of Los Angeles, who's now about to move into a federal position. And, I said, well, we have these chemicals that are being discharged from the LA River into the ocean, and, it's time we need to do something to clean up this river. And essentially what was going on for all these years is everybody's pointing the finger at one another. Santa Monica was being sued by the EPA because they were the end of the LA River, and so all these chemicals are being discharged into Santa Monica Bay. But the LA River runs through all of LA County, and, in the San Fernando Valley, we have it was the hot rod capital of America, so we had all the hot rod shops that did the chrome plating, oils, and so on and so forth from car work were being discharged into the street. Then the rain would come, and that would all wash into the LA River. And Santa Monica was getting hit with the fine. So essentially what was happening is all these different cities were suing one another, and for 20 years they're all suing one another, pointing the finger at one another. No one's doing anything to clean up the river. So I get up there and I speak at City Hall there to all the councilmen, and I said, look, suing one another isn't going to make any progress. It's not going to solve anything. I did study some environmental law in college, and my understanding is anytime we have a river or other water source that comes into contact with the ocean, it's the job of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to manage the project. So I get this huge applause. Everybody, that this is kind of the start of when everybody wanted me to run for office in Los Angeles. So anyways, the city took that and went to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They were able to get $500 million in funding towards the LA River project. The whole project's about $1 billion. It's under works right now. But what's happened with the project, a lot of the money's being used. They're putting in park benches, trees, lighting, all kinds of stuff to hide the river from sight, out of sight, out of mind. And the focus isn't really on cleaning up the river. What's going to happen is that water's going to be diverted to a deserted area where it's going to recharge groundwater. My core issue with it, we do have hexavalent chromium in that water. If you've ever seen the Aaron Brockovich movie, hexavalent chromium is a carcinogen. We have that, and we have a chemical called TCE, trichloroethylene. That's coming from the Aerojet Rocketdyne facility. And we'll discuss that in the next issue. I've been kind of putting off this issue about nuclear waste. It's a big one. You know, one of the challenges I'm having with these podcasts, people want to hear positive podcasts and hope for the future. And I want to be accurate and truthful with you about these different environmental problems and what's really involved in cleaning them up. So with this LA River project, the water is going to be diverted to the desert, and we're going to keep putting this hexavalent chromium and this TCE, which is highly carcinogenic, into the ground. And ultimately, it's back to that first rule of ecology, that everything's connected to everything else. We're not treating those chemicals. We're putting it in the ground. And sooner or later, it's going to end up back in the groundwater. So we have this $1 billion project now for the LA River. And granted, we're not going to be dumping all that in the ocean anymore. And some of this will be filtered out through the soil, and it's in a deserted area. So it isn't a problem right now, but at some point in the future, I fear that it will become a problem. Whether it's in my lifetime or not, I don't know. When I told them that I wanted to work on the project, the Army Corps of Engineers, this is another challenge I face. Here I am, a defense contractor, perfect performance with Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, U.S. Forest Service, NASA, every federal government agency for 20 plus years. And everything's come down to this affirmative action now. And I can't tell you how many times I've been told, nobody here wants to do business with you. You're a white male and you went to college. Well, I thought the whole point of me having all this education and this experience was to be able to solve these problems. So at any rate, I'm the one that proposed this whole, let's get the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers involved. And I'm the one that got us this $500 million in funding. And so I have to talk to these female immigrants at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and then they tell me, oh, well, if you want to work on the project, Dan, you can volunteer and you can work on it for free. I don't work for free. So we'll be dumping that chromium and that trichloroethylene into the groundwater for the future generations to have problems to worry about.